Zach Lowe spoke on the direction the Charlotte Hornets should take going forward. We'll break down those comments. And also, James Borrego, he's in the conversation these days. Should the Hornets have fired him a couple of years ago? Was that the wrong decision? We'll talk about it all today. Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place a $5 bet, you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. There is David Walker dressed as Devin Booker, he says. You can find him on Twitter at David B. Walker. You did that just for Doug?
The B is for Beanie or Booker.
You did that just for Doug today, right?
I did it just for Doug. Only for Doug.
Doug is a huge fan. Go tweet at Doug and talk about how great Devin Booker is on his Twitter handle.
If you want to get blocked.
Oh, you don't block people though. That's not your game.
I block.
You don't do that. That's Doug Branson. You can find his Substack because you can't find him on Twitter. You can find his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. All right, we'll get to the pain of the 3 Hornets losses. It's been a while since we've talked about the pain with David because it's been a week. A lot's happened in a week, David. So we're going to talk about that in a moment.
Not much.
I did want to go to Zach Lowe's comment on the world famous Lowe Post podcast, where he talked about the Charlotte Hornets direction. And he said Charlotte should be in full trade mode. You keep LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, Nick Smith Jr., and Brandon Miller, of course. And you test the market for everyone else and prepare for a transitional summer with another lottery pick and new ownership putting its stamp on the organization. I do feel like those are the right guys. And I feel like this is a conversation also being had because everybody knows the Hornets have to undergo a pretty drastic change this offseason. How drastic it's going to be, we don't know. But we do know that we're going to see a different GM. We're probably going to see a different head coach. It would be surprising, especially now, if Steve Clifford came back and if Mitch Kupchak came back. Now you have to make the decision on what players you're keeping, whether it be at the deadline or whether it be going into the following season. So we've had this convo a lot, and it does feel like the consensus more so, it's the BMW package, right? It's LaMelo Ball, it's Mark Williams, it's Brandon Miller, but also Nick Smith Jr. I agree with. He's not untouchable, but I would agree trying to keep Nick Smith Jr. As much as you can, unless there's an offer that just blows your mind. David, what do you think about Zach Lowe's comments, and have you thought about the Hornets core that they should keep intact while everybody else gets traded and moved on from?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is exactly what they should be doing. And like you said, Walker, you guys have talked about it a bunch. Zach Lowe kind of puts his stamp on it. But I think this is what a lot of the vocal Hornets folks on Twitter and in the arena and everywhere else, those that are watching. I mean, there's some still out there. I got a buddy who's like, I just want to see this whole core together. I just want to see what they can do. And I said, I don't want to see that anymore. No. It's time to make a move. It's time to do something else. And it feels like this is the calm before the storm. Once they get the new leadership or whomever in place. But yeah, this thing is clearly not working. They've tried it on multiple levels. They've tried it with this mini core, and it's just been so tumultuous that they've got to make a change. They've got to make a change for the sanity, honestly, of people watching. I mean, they can't continue to watch this product, this same core, this same effort roll out there on a night in, night out basis. It's frustrating. I think that's where you're seeing a lot of this frustration voice right now from people that are continue to watch, the true sickos, and it's hard to blame them. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what they should be doing. That looks like what teams that have surpassed the Hornets, that have skyrocketed past the Hornets on the way to respectability, have been doing, is collecting young assets, building that way, and making savvy trades when they can. So yeah, I think that's your core four that you want to keep. And like you said, we love what Nick Smith Jr. has done. If somebody comes to you with, something you just can't turn down, maybe you figure out a way to make that work. But yeah, I mean, they've got to make a change on multiple levels. And LaMelo, they're in tandem with LaMelo now. So that's how they're going to move forward. That's how they're going to proceed. So I think that's the right four to do it. And it seems like a no-brainer because what else can you do with this current group at this point? It feels hard to steer it back on the right course right now.
What do you think, Doug?
Well, Zach Lowe is right to include Nick Smith Jr. for this reason. He has an elite skill set. He has one elite skill set that has been proven and forged in the fire of actual NBA, serious NBA minutes. And you can't discount that. I mean, the Hornets hung on to James Bouknight and Kai Jones for these many years, and neither of those guys really had a proven NBA skill set, certainly not elite shot makers like Nick Smith Jr. You need multiple guys like that. If you're going to go through a rebuild or a mini rebuild, you have to have guys you can put the ball in their hands and ask them to go get a bucket, and they do. And that's what Nick Smith Jr. can do. Now, can he develop some of those other things that would make him like a legit sixth man or role player, or even, can he develop them such that he even becomes in conversation as one of the, 3 or 4 best players on your team? Well, that's to be seen. That's probably going to take a few years to figure out, but you've seen enough here in year one to absolutely justify holding on to him just to see what comes of it. Now, in terms of the, should they tear it all down versus stick with this core, I think the way your buddy felt, David, is the exact way this franchise has felt, is they've always wanted to see if the thing they built was going to work, if the airplane that they built was actually going to fly. And unfortunately, they have not gotten that opportunity because of injuries. But you're right, David, there's just not going to be much tolerance for any more time to see if it all can work out, because every year that goes by, you're 1 year closer to having to have another conversation with LaMelo Ball about continuing on with this franchise. The difficulty with tearing it all down and going into a full rebuild is that you've got LaMelo Ball on a max contract in his 5th year, and you're getting closer to that conversation. And how long does it take if you tear this thing all the way down to the studs? So I think the line that they have to navigate here, this new ownership group, is how do we get away from what we were doing, transition into something new without completely, going scorched earth on the roster and getting even worse than this season. That's going to be the difficult thing, because I'm not even sure that LaMelo would be super interested in going through 2 or 3 years of that.
Well, and that's the question. When we were discussing whether they should only keep those 4, one part of the question is, okay, yeah, are you asking if they should try to keep PJ and Gordon and then get somebody else and those guys move to a different role? No, the real question is, do you keep that many? Is 4 too much, or do you just continue to get rid of everybody to the point where now we're having this real conversation about LaMelo? That's the question that is closer to what the Hornets should be having. But no, I don't think they should be getting rid of LaMelo after the $200 million extension. He is a good player. I think you have to figure out if he's going to be a healthy player for sure. But even with the injuries that he suffered now, it's not enough to move on from and completely tear it down to the studs. I wouldn't agree with that. Yeah. Brandon Miller, clearly, you're not moving off of his 2nd overall pick after a strong 30, 40 game start to his season, his career. So no, you're not moving on from him. Here's the thing for me too, though. So as we talk about, I think that's the right 4 players. I think that's it.
It's LaMelo and 3 rookie contracts, right?
Yep.
Or
yep.
At the time being. So
that are promising, right? Varying levels of promising. Brandon by far being the most. You can make your own decision on Mark and Nick Smith Jr. I know people sour on Mark. We can get to him in the center rotation. Mark has shown you enough to want to see what he can do the next couple of years. I would like to hold on to him. So with these 4 guys, I think that's the right decision. The problem is that when people try to figure out how far to tear it down, you often want, all right, well, we'll keep all the valuable players and try to trade all the invaluable players. Wait, now you're not going to get anything. Nobody else wants those guys either. So how much value are you going to have to trade? So the guys that might have it, one is Gordon Hayward, who you have to deal at the deadline or you don't trade him anymore. Yeah. You can do a sign and trade, but that wouldn't make sense. And so I think what's going to happen is deadline for Gordon Hayward. So if you don't trade him at the deadline, you're not trading him anymore. Now you have Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier has value. So we'll see exactly how much. Maybe we think it's more than it actually is out there because of how great he's been. Zach Lowe also showered him with praise along Chris Herring when they were picking out their all-stars. He's not going to make the team. But Terry has salvaged some of the value that he was not able to get on the trade market last year. Miles Bridges will not be traded unless he signs off on it, which means he's probably just going to hit unrestricted free agency. That's a big old talent that you're not going to be able to get anything in return. And I don't know what you would get for PJ. So that's the tough part, all right? Yep. That's the tough part, trying to figure out how much value you could get while tearing it down to those 4 players, such as Zach suggested.
Look, we keep assuming that Miles Bridges wouldn't sign off on a trade. But, I mean, if they keep losing like this and Miles is offered the opportunity to go literally anywhere else with playoff implications, I don't know. Maybe, maybe.
That was my point, too. It's like, I've thought about that, but even still, Miles has control to limit what value you get, right? Like, it's not that he wouldn't agree to a trade.
His contract does that. I mean, he's only $8 million. Yeah. So you would have to pair him with multiple other players if you wanted to bring back any kind of, like, significant player package back. And I don't think any team with all the baggage is going to be I don't think they're going to be willing to really move heaven and earth when they know that he's going to hit unrestricted free agency, and they'll have that opportunity to make that case anyway.
All proving my point, though, honestly, right? Like it all proves.
I wasn't disagreeing with you. I'd love to prove your point.
Oh no, thank you. No, I know you weren't disagreeing. All that proving the point of when you're trying to keep all the valuable players, and so now Gordon and Miles, if it doesn't happen at the deadline, and that's tough. Yeah. Now you move on to PJ and Terry, and
I know.
And when we're talking about this timing wise, it's like who's going to do this and when are they going to do it? I mean, what's the impetus for Mitch to do this? He's never done it. So why would he do it now when you think there's a changing of the guard coming in, so like, I mean, is this stuff happening now? Is this off-season? It feels more like off-season draft time,
right?
Look, summertime stuff.
If you're this ownership, if I were the ownership group, I would not be asking Mitch Kupchak to like completely reform this roster at the trade deadline. I would be asking Mitch he would be getting a note that said something to the effect of, "Hey, make sure the books are good, right? Make sure everything's clean, and that way when this does happen, they'll have maximum flexibility to try to hit that gap of like remaking this team." Because here's the thing, bottom line. The stink of losing is like all over some of these players, some of the veteran guys, not the rookie contracts. They'll be fine. They don't know what's going on. That's why you can keep Mark and Brandon and Nick Smith Jr. because they don't know any better. But a lot of these other guys have lost a lot of games as members of the Charlotte Hornets. And at some point, even if you love those players, even if you love Terry Rozier, you've got to move on and bring some new voices into a locker room that haven't been coming to the same locker room over and over again and losing over and over again and have all of that institutional memory. You have to move on from those guys and bring in some guys that don't have that because what happens is what we're seeing right now, which is bad body language, guys that just don't – the belief is starting to crack. And that's why you're getting some of these like crazy numbers in terms of them not getting back into transition, in terms of them missing a god-awful amount of layups. I mean, it is crazy. Some of the stuff we're seeing right now, I think is just all attributed to they have lost a lot, they've been very injured, and they can't get over it.
Yeah. It's tough.
And by the way, the Mitch Kupchak conversation, it goes back to the point of, is this the time that we celebrate him not doing something? Like, make sure the books are good. This goes back to, wait, have we actually come full circle to the point where we're asking him not to do something? We threw away the stick and we've got our hand. Hey, nope, I'm not poking it. Nope, it's gone.
Right.
Not us. Gone. We're not asking that anymore. Look, he works at the pleasure of Rich Schnaub and Gabe Plotkin at this point. So at this point, you're asking the ownership group to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Here. And by the way, if they do the very difficult thing of remaking the roster, and somehow we're sitting here on an off-season show next season going, I think they got a chance to dice it up a little bit in the Eastern Conference, then they will deserve a lot of credit because that's going to be a very difficult thing to do.
Oh, yeah. We want to give them to him.
I do think Mitch is still going to get calls. Like his phone is still going to ring, especially for Terry. The Terry and the Lakers thing to me still makes a ton of sense.
I agree.
What can you possibly squeeze out of them to get back? That'll be the question. I think they have some draft picks. I'm not sure on that. I haven't done my Lakers homework this morning, guys, but I'm sure they could offer up something. And they need, I mean, that's a great fit to me. And I would love it for Terry personally. But so I think his phone is going to ring. More so for Terry now than anyone else, just because of the streak he's been on. So like, there are going to be decisions, there are going to be decisions that have to be made. And unless they're like, just don't do anything, just give us your phone, Mitch, turn your phone in. We'll guard your landline. And if they just, handicap them, then not let them do anything. There's still going to be some
I don't think that's going to be a problem. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Well, and just to put a bow on this first segment, you mentioned Terry Rozier to the Lakers. ESPN's Tim McMahon said, if I'm Rob Pelinka, I'm calling Charlotte. I'm inquiring about Terry Rozier. And then Brian Windhorst responded and said, he's a shoot first player. He's a guy who can give you big time offense. He's an explosive offensive player. Which is wrong,
by the way. Shoot first. His assist percentage is like above 31%. This is just classic not watching the Hornets. He's a good passer, folks. Anyway,
I knew that. Well, actually, Brian, I knew that was about to happen. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the center of inattention. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll talk about the center rotation, the lack of Mark Williams, maybe discuss his future a little more, but also the depth pieces: Nick Richards, Nathan Mensah, James Najee. I'm going to bring up James Najee. That's coming up next in Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some things you want to keep the same about yourself or your life in 2024? Where are you already crushing it? And then you can think opposite of new year, new you. Around New Year's, we get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what we're already doing right. Maybe you finally organize one part of your space and you want to tackle another. I just did that, by the way. Yay me. Or maybe you're taking your supplements and every morning you're taking them and now you want to actually eat breakfast too. Therapy helps you find your strength so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that actually really stick. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can even switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season wrapped up. It's done. We're actually even already done with Wild Card Weekend, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find popular parlays. And you can do even more than that. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
So we ended the last segment, and David was mentioning a possible trade of Terry Rozier to the Los Angeles Lakers and was inquiring about the picks that they had available. So let me just list these down. These are the Los Angeles first-round picks, okay? 2023, that one went to the Pelicans. 2024, that's owned by the Pelicans as well. They have the rights to receive the 2025 pick instead. That's again due to the Anthony Davis trade. The 2025 first-round pick also owned by the Pelicans, but they have the rights to this pick if they forego the 2024 pick. So the earliest pick, I think, the first-round pick that you could get for Terry Rozier would be the 2026 pick.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and I think they actually, if I'm not mistaken, if you keep going further down that list, Doug, I could be wrong about this, but I actually think they don't have, I don't think they have 27 or 28, and maybe they have 29 after that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like there are a lot of first rounders.
This feels like this may be a little bit of an older article. So this says that they own them. I'll keep double checking this. Actually, this fanspo.com is going to be the more accurate. No, it looks like they own They do not own their 2027 pick. That is gone.
Right.
You're right about that, but they do have 2028. So you could get that.
Okay.
That 26 is the sweet spot, if the world isn't on fire by then, if we're all still around, then 2026 choice.
Is that Cooper Flag, or is that's going to be past his?
No, we're past Cooper Flag at that point.
Cooper would be
that's somebody
25.
we don't know.
Well, so
I'll look it up. I'll look up who they're projecting in 2020. The little 2026 mock draft. This is right in my wheelhouse. Oh man,
is Bronny in play there somewhere?
Maybe he needs to go back to school a couple of years, and then LeBron James.
So roster wise, there's not a whole lot that you're looking to build off of, unless they wanted to. I mean, they're not letting go Austin Reeves.
The roster. No, I mean, unless
does Cam Reddish do anything for you?
No, he used to. God, I used to love me some Cam Reddish. Rui Hachimura used to do something for one Doug Branson.
Oh, how about 2026? Second overall on this NBA draft room mock draft in 2026 is Cameron Boozer, son of Carlos Boozer.
Now we're talking.
Okay, I'm surprised that there's somebody we actually can figure out who they're related to or who we know.
Just to go completely off script here, did you guys see the NBA draft is going to 2 nights?
I did see that.
We're gonna have to dedicate. Once things get out of hand here, soon, we should dedicate an entire complaints pod. I hate this idea. I don't like it. No one working that likes that idea. What are we? The GMs are complaining because they don't have enough time for the second round. Who's going to watch the second round, by the way, when they put it on ESPN Bet or whatever?
Sickos.
It could result in more trades just simply out of boredom, just simply out of having nothing else to do.
We're not coming back in the morning.
Right.
If they're going to do that, they should go back and hold it in the hotel lobby of, the Holiday Inn in downtown Cleveland, and just let's go all the way old school. You know what I mean? Just go do it in the ballroom.
Oh, wow.
It's like
Caden Boozer in 2026, number 10 overall on this list. So Boozer's got a couple of boozers.
Yeah. Twins.
Okay. All right. We need no more 2026 draft talk. Sorry. No more 2026 draft talk. Okay. Doug, you're the one that wanted to talk about the center of inattention. And so maybe we could try to find the best center in 2026. Maybe that is Boozer. He's tall. Maybe that's the case.
No. They got them as wings. Cameron is 6'9", 215. Caden, 6'4", 190. Both those are wings.
All right. I opened that up for an additional comment. I can only blame myself. What do you want to talk about with the center position?
It's not very good right now. I think we can all agree. I don't think there's going to be much debate there. And Mark Williams has some things to develop. Look, I think if he doesn't, I said this on a show that I don't think either of you, maybe David was on this show. I don't think you were, Walker, but I said something that is might be a little bit outlandish. I don't know, that if Mark Williams doesn't develop an outside shot, that I think eventually, he's a bench big for the Charlotte Hornets, that they would still go out and look for that center who can spread the floor and allow them to go 5 out. So there's that issue. But apart from that, they just don't have any depth. And this is what feels like the 5th or 6th straight season now where the Hornets have gone into a season without an NBA-level big rotation. And I thought it was the right move to sign Nick Richards to the very affordable contract that they did, because I thought, look, he's improving. He's going to give you some valuable contributions off the bench. And ultimately, the contract was such that it was very tradable, that if they wanted to rework, and it still is, and that's still a value to the Charlotte Hornets, he could be included in some kind of trade to make the numbers work. But they didn't follow that up by getting a third big, and they're depending on Nathan Mensah, who is struggling because he's not big enough, he's not quick enough to not foul guys or be able to really take it inside and make a layup or make any kind of post move. And so, look, I mean, the center position is giving up a ton of points at the rim. I was looking at giving up points at the rim, but also not scoring. I was looking at their rim accuracy over the past couple of games, 37.5%. That would be, when you're talking about league averages, that would be worst in the league. 41.7% in the game against San Antonio. That would also be worst in the league. 47.1% against Sacramento. That would be fourth percentile, so probably like second or third worst in the NBA. It doesn't get much better from there, folks. They're not scoring at the rim. They're not defending the rim. And the center position has been left to die on the vine. It's the one area that they're going to have to continue to look at if they rework this roster.
David, what do you think about the center rotation right now with Mark Williams being out, but also Nick Richards? I think we know what it is with Mensa. Just for reference, I mean, like
he's trying real hard.
To his credit, he's out there giving it. He's giving it all he has. He
got super defensive over Mensa. Like, whoa, Mensa, we're not.
Because I don't want to be the podcast that comes on and like piles on guys who are being put in positions that they shouldn't be put in. Nathan Mensa should not be out there on an NBA floor having to deal with Victor Wembanyama and Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
Like, this guy should be developing his skills in the G League, and the Hornets are putting him out there to be eaten by the Wolves. Well, they haven't. I don't know whether they play the Timberwolves, but you know.
Logical minds can understand that we're not piling on Mensa, except maybe when I reference the fact that he's averaging more fouls than points. But other than that, I'm not going to pile on Nathan Mensa. Not at all.
This continued inability to fill the center position with any depth just always reminds me that we should have kept Duren and Mark Williams on draft night, like Walker and I wanted to do. And it
was you and Doug. Did you want to, you both wanted to go two centers. You and Doug.
Was that you, Doug?
Yep.
It was totally me. I loved
me and Doug.
I loved
I was against it. I wanted to go wing and center, and you guys wanted to go double up on the center position.
Well, and what is ridiculous is that their justification at the time was that they had too many other players that they were trying to develop. And now James Bouknight.
We can all agree on that.
James Bouknight can't get off the bench. Kai Jones is off the roster.
But Nick Smith Jr., we got to remember, Nick Smith Jr., we just put in the core to keep.
That's you always come back to that one, don't you? I agree with that one. But yeah, I mean, look, I like Mark Williams. I think he has shown you enough that I think he can be a starter. I think he's still being a starter. I mean, he's got to get back on the floor for the love of God, but I think he can still develop. He's still got some learning to do. It'd be great if he could get a little bit stronger and be able to hold his own down there a little bit more. But like his length and just his ability to be a presence down there is, and maybe we're just been starved for it, but I liked a lot about it. I would love to see him get some extended play with LaMelo if those two can ever get healthy again. But I mean, yeah, after that, you're just asking everybody to play above their head. I mean, even Nick Richards, right? I mean, in spurts, he'd be a great energy guy. He's done even he's been asked to do obviously too much and has is trying hard, but like he is just limited in certain areas, and he kind of is what he is. Where Mark, I think, still has some room to grow. I think Nick kind of is.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, well, and you lose the thing that made Nick so valuable, which was the energy play, which was the putback play. I mean, his second chance points have really cratered his ability to do that. And, he's missing catches. He's doing some stuff that you weren't used to seeing him do. And I think it's because he's being asked to do so much else on the defensive end of the floor, because offensively, you're not running anything through him. I mean, his usage percentage is super low. His points per shot attempt is great, but that's because like the one or two times he catches the ball, he's right at the rim for a dunk. But you're losing a lot of that offensive rebounding ability that he was known for when he was doing it off the bench.
You're saying Nick Richards?
Nick Richards, yeah.
Well, remember when Mark Williams went out, he was third in offensive rebounding in the league. Like it was weird because you had Mark and Nick Richards both really good at that skill set, except Nick Richards would come in and not give you the defensive rebounding that you need. The offensive rebounding percentage, I believe, was only behind Rudy Gobert and Clint Capella at the time, and then Mark Williams goes to the bench, and you still it's the offensive rebounding that you have more of a strength. I have more thoughts on the center position, but let's move on to the next break. We talked too much about the 2026 draft and Carlos Boozer's kids. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll talk more about the center position, but lots of James Borrego convo happening in Hornets Twitter land. We'll get to that in just a moment. The last segment of Locked On Hornets. Before we do that, I do want to talk about Jace Medical. This episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? If you found yourself cut off from modern medical care and treatment, whether it's on an outdoor adventure, in a natural disaster, or in a foreign country, do you have a plan? With the Jace case, you can secure your own supply of basic antibiotics with ease and peace of mind. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinus infections, skin infections, even more than that. The stuff could really happen to any of us, all of that stuff. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com. Use offer code Locked On to get $20 off your order. Again, use Locked On to get $20 off your order at jacemedical.com. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, you said you have something for me if I want it. I don't know if I want it. I have a feeling I know where this is going, but go ahead, Doug. Take the floor. Where are we going with this?
Well, you asked me if I had something on the center position, and I do. And one of the best centers in the league right now, Victor Wembanyama, and his younger brother, Oscar Wembanyama, is available in the 2027 draft, currently ranked 7th among small forwards, not a center, 6'7", from France. If you want to get in on the Wembanyama game, you trade for that 2027 Lakers pick, and you'll be in the money.
Now, how close are the Wembanyama to being like the Antetokounmpos? Like, are we getting a Giannis here? Is this a Giannis situation that we're working with? We don't know that, right? We're not sure. I haven't seen any scouting reports.
Yeah, maybe the younger brother is better. Maybe, just maybe we could do that.
Did you have something you want to say on the center thing, Walker?
I did.
Go ahead.
It didn't have anything to do about Oscar.
Thanks for having me on. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I think the center position. No, for me, I'm with you, David. Like the Mark Williams stuff. I think the thing about Mark Williams compared to a Nick Richards or anybody else, we've seen. I think actual special games. I don't think I'm using that title loosely. I go to Boston when that was the best game that he played, and he didn't hit a 3. But he also was special in that he was gobbling up all the rebounds. He put forth a 100% effort, right? Like, even if he's 80% of what that Boston Celtics game looked like, that's a bona fide starter in the league to me. And he needs to – you're totally right, Doug, when you have some of the concerns about him. And I know other people are, a little bit off of the Mark Williams hype train. It was full steam ahead coming into the season, has a great debut, but then he's been inconsistent. That's true. And I didn't expect that. And I was wrong about just expecting consistency continuing to go up in his sophomore campaign. But I do think we see special games from him to the point where I think he can be a really big contributor. And the shot for me, like, guys, he's not even shooting mid-range jumpers this year. Remember last year we had the Phoenix game where he was able to knock down a couple of 15-foot elbows. And even if he's not shooting the three-pointer, they're not exploring that part at all. Like, as we start to transition into the coaching, can we just get like some pick and pop from Mark Williams? I know mid-rangers are not supposed to happen, but maybe every once in a while you shoot that mid-ranger from the elbow or wherever he is, baseline, just to give a little more space for the guards to operate. Because Mark has the touch. We've seen that. The finesse layup package is very real. When he does shoot the mid-range, we feel very good about it. The free throw percentage was good coming into his NBA career. And so maybe we just even extended a little bit more to the 15-foot area where it doesn't just have to be within 5 feet or less. And we're not even exploring that. So
we'll have plenty of time. There's plenty of time, Walker. A lot of season to go. Yep. And if this thing continues to get out of hand, they'll have a lot of time to experiment with all kinds of things. They have been with Nick Richards because the paint has been completely cut off as teams realize that the Hornets can't shoot, and so they lock down the paint. Richards has had a couple of opportunities to hit mid-range shots, and he's taken them, and he's missed them pretty terribly. So, sorry, guys, I was wrong about that. I don't think he's hiding anything under a bushel at this point. My bad.
Isn't that a part of the larger issue, though, with the Hornets and the center position? It's just not – there's not that super skilled guy. There's not that modern NBA center there, that's either going to step out and pick and pop or that's crafty with the passing of the basketball. Like they don't have anyone to match up with, even like a Sengun, somebody like that, who's going to be skilled and score in a couple of different ways. That's something that they just have not. That position just has not matured in that way. To match up with where the league is kind of going, right?
It's not just about shooting; it's about passing as well. I mean, Sabonis, Jokic, Wembanyama can pass it, and you just mentioned Sengun. So, like, if you're going to have a big that can't pass and can't shoot,
but he can pass.
If all your bigs are like that, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think Mark Williams can pass. But I think a lot of the offensive stuff, they're just so focused on giving him pick and roll and diving. Like, that's it, And,
right.
And so,
and maybe that's part of it, right? Maybe that's the thinking, or maybe he's got a little more to show that we just haven't seen. But something there is not developing itself, whether it's from a skill set or whether it's from a scheme.
Really, it's physicality on defense. Like, that's if I were to say, hey, Walker, you can have a problem fixed tomorrow for Mark Williams, what would it be? It would be physicality on defense and grabbing defensive rebounds. That'd be it. Like, if he does that, I feel just fine about what he can do. So, and speaking of not putting Mark Williams in some of these situations we'd like to see him in offensively just to try it, Steve Clifford is the one making those decisions. And Steve Clifford, as we've come to his defense, I don't like when he was announced the head coach for the second time, I had a problem with it because it seemed, and it flat out was, unplanned. You wanted to go after Kenny Atkinson. Atkinson, to the fault of the Hornets and to the fault of Atkinson, Kenny goes back to Golden State, maybe even understandably so. And so all these other coaching candidates that were on the table, there were plenty of them. Vanderpool, there was Darvin Ham at the time, D'Antoni for sure. Yeah, nobody. Nope. None of those guys were going to go, try to see what the deal is. We're going to go right back to Steve Clifford. And so it felt unprepared. No Atkinson. Now we don't have an answer. Let's go back to the guy that we fired the first go around. Not even like early, the last time we made a coaching decision. And so that's what I hated about it, even if I don't think all of this is Steve Clifford's fault. Now we're seeing a lot of Twitter accounts that talk about the Charlotte Hornets get in on the James Borrego combo here. And I know that I think it was a little polarizing when they fired Borrego. I think that there were people that didn't think that was the right decision. I know we had a lot of conversation about it. I ultimately understood if you have a graphic of a blowout and a play-in tournament loss up in the locker room all year long as motivation and then get beat worse the next play-in game, then maybe something has to change because those losses are painful. When you get beat down by 30 to both the Pacers and the Hawks by 30, then yeah, I understand if you have to move on. So people acting like James Borrego would be a 15-win, 20-win team with how it's constructed now, with all the injuries that they've suffered the last couple of years. That's what I just can't buy. If James Borrego was here, life would be better. I completely disagree. If you don't think he should have been fired, okay, there are reasons for that. I think there's a logical explanation for him not to have been fired. But to say that this season would have gone so differently with James Borrego as the head coach, I can't get on board with that whatsoever.
I mean, maybe just thinking chaos theory wise that it can't get any worse, that any change would have made it better. I mean, I think you could maybe go in that direction, but you're right. I mean, look, half of his staff is still on the payroll.
That's a great point. It's actually a great point. Yes.
You're getting Borrego without Borrego. No one was howling too much. Whenever any coach gets fired, all of the coaches in the NBA media sphere always come to coach's defense. And so it's always degrees of how much they howl about a coach getting fired. And, you had a little bit of ooh, what are they doing? They've gone through a lot of changes, but no one was really he didn't get a job he didn't get a head coaching job immediately after that. So his services weren't extremely valued in that way. So I think a lot of this conversation is only about being completely sick. And there have, just a lot of losing and a lot of bad luck. And here's the thing. When you have as much bad luck that you can't really explain, you cannot explain what has happened to the Charlotte Hornets over the past 2 seasons. I really think there's trauma. There's serious trauma in the fan base where they are dealing with stuff that they can't explain. They can't go to Basketball Reference or Cleaning the Glass and look at a number and say, oh, yep, there it is. If they just fix that one thing, if they just fire the head coach, so now when you can't explain something, then you just go completely insane. You go wild and you talk about bringing back a guy or not firing a guy who lost 2 play-in games by a combined 60 or 70 points. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think, David?
Yeah. I'm we liked a lot of, or I liked a lot of what Borrego did here. He had a fun team on the floor. He had a fun product on the floor. I saw certain things that were not being fixed and addressed that kept happening over and over and over again, to where I got to the point was, yes, let's make a change. Let's see what else they can do. They tried to upgrade that position. To your point, we all know the Kenny Atkinson thing, and they were caught flat-footed. They were caught with their pants down and didn't have anything else to do. So they knew the guy who knew the building and knew most of the people in it, and they asked him to come and kind of shepherd the ship. And whatever happened between now and then, there's a ownership change. Like there wasn't probably a great time to make a big head coaching change when people are talking about selling the team. But to think that Borrego, who is coaching now as an assistant in New Orleans, would be able to guide this group, because that's what all the other thing we talk about, roster construction. This team is not a good team put together, and that Borrego would be able to come in and somehow turn that on his head and have him in the playoff race is, I think, a little short-sighted. I understand all the frustration, and I really do. I just don't think that looking back now, saying they should have kept Borrego, they shouldn't have tried and upgraded that position at the time, was the bad thing to do. And like Clifford's really getting pounded right now, and I get it. I mean, there's a lot of frustration with watching the same thing happen over and over and over again. I think that will change. But it's just tough to watch right now. But Borrego had his own shortcomings, and it was time to move on, I think, for the Hornets. They tried to take a step up, and it didn't work out. But the revisionist history on that I think is a little short-sighted.
Well, and I think it says that I'm doing Twitter correctly, because I did not see this conversation at all. I have curated my Twitter or X or whatever such that I avoided this. So that really tells me that the work that I've put in over the past year has been valuable, has been good.
And like, we're not saying it's good right now. Obviously it's not, but both things can be true, right? Like, it was time to make a change, and this is a disaster. Like,
right. If Kenny Atkinson were the coach right now, we would not be talking about, even if you take Kenny Atkinson and all of the injuries, like, we wouldn't be talking. No one would be talking about James Borrego.
Well, and this is my point too. Trying to find the number that encapsulates all of the pain and the trauma, as Doug puts it. Like, I know it's tough to find that number, but the one I went to, I think it was a few weeks ago, that I'll say again here, Terry Rozier played 63 games last season, and that was the fourth most of any Charlotte Hornet. When you go to James Borrego's last year, 63 would have been eighth. And it was fourth last year. So all the injuries, like, Steve Clifford used to have this reputation of not wanting to play rookies at all, even if you were drafted in the lottery. Now he's going to Nathan Mensah. Do you think he's going to Mensah by choice? This is the guy that didn't want to play Malik Monk, the 11th overall pick. This is the guy that didn't want to play a lot of rookies. But no, it's his decision. He wants to play Mensah because Mensah just is showing that something. All right, I'm done piling on Mensah. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets.
Well, hey, I got a number for you. My number is 0. That's the number of things that Mitch Kupchak has done outside of the draft to improve this team. It's also the number of centers on this roster that can pass and shoot. I don't know if a Boozer wears 0, but it might be that might be their number as well in the 2026 draft.
Okay, we'll end with Boozer talk. That'll do it. That will really do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. Go follow David Walker on Twitter at David B. Walker. Go read Doug's work on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and go listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow to preview the New Orleans Pelicans game, led by James Borrego.